I'm Sarina Fazan, taking a risk, making a difference, and changing the course of your life. Remarkable stories from people defying the odds. You're listening to On the Record.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this episode of On the Record. I'm here with Sharon Fekete. I got the name right.
100% correct.
Awesome. Awesome sauce, as my 13-year-old says. Awesome sauce. But you are awesome, Sharon.
Thank you.
She is the Dr. Whisperer, a book author and an entrepreneur, and also a survivor and a show of strength for people
Thank you.
everywhere. Your story is incredible. You actually, at a younger age, tried to commit suicide.
Yeah, so only because I'm in the world of mental health now do I understand that we should no longer say commit suicide. We
Thank
need
you.
to say, because I didn't know this
Mhm.
myself until I wrote the book, that commit sounds like murder, which is true, right? Commit suicide. It
Yes.
sounds like a terrible act, but I was lucky enough not to die by suicide. I certainly attempted it on my life when I was very young.
So let's go back to your story. Well, and actually maybe currently, and instead of commit, we should say attempt.
Well, when we're talking past tense, we say died by suicide. We should never say commit suicide because, like I mentioned, it just sounds like a crime.
Mhm.
And there's already enough stigma surrounding suicide and mental health. So the way we say things, of course, are so important because they impact everybody when we're discussing mental health. So, if somebody attempted suicide or they died by suicide, I've learned so much. I was botching it myself for so long, and it wasn't until like somebody cared enough about me to
Mhm.
say, "Hey, listen, if you're going to really have this conversation, we need to do everything that we can to normalize the conversation and to also to speak about it in a way that's honoring the people that have lost their lives."
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And thank you for teaching us
Yeah.
this because we need to learn it.
Yeah.
You were 26 years sober.
That is correct.
Congratulations.
August 11th. Thank you. 1994, my mother's birthday.
Oh,
Yeah.
did her birthday inspire you?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that there's so many things that led up to it, but I remember being at the East Point Inn, which was a restaurant we went to as a family, as kids, and it's no longer there in New York. And I remember having a Coors Light, and I just could not. We were celebrating Mom's birthday, and I could not keep it down. I was dropping it because I was thinking about how alcohol and drugs had taken my life in such a horrible direction that I knew it was my last drink. So it's just great that it ended up being Mom's birthday. I don't think I can top the gift that I gave her
Absolutely.
26 years ago.
Is she still
Yes.
with us?
Yes, she's in New York today, but she lives around the corner from me, Mom and Dad.
Wonderful. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that's wonderful.
Mhm.
So I want to go back, of course, to your life, but to the present day right now. You are the Dr. Whisperer.
That's
So
correct.
what is that, Sharon? What is that exactly?
Right.
What are you
So,
doing?
I started in the medical field in my 20s. So I quickly moved up, I should say, to the director of operations for a company called New York Medical. And we had 11 offices and 46 satellite offices, and there were neurologists and internal med, and we had physical therapy and massage therapy and orthopedics. So we had Eastern and Western medicine, and we were the bosses of these physicians because they worked for the company. So it was a very interesting way to come into the medical field, and hence why today I can work with any type of physician, because I didn't come in with this fear that I'm working for the professional. I mean, there was the CEO who was the physician, but all of the doctors worked for us. And it taught me, how human, they're physicians, they're the greatest professionals, but they're not the best at business, and we don't want them to be. We'd rather them focus on, saving our lives versus business and hiring and all of that good stuff. So, yeah, I've been in medical for a long time and came here 16 years ago and ran pediatrics for 8 years, which I loved. I loved pediatrics. I loved seeing the kids.
Yeah, there's something
Yeah.
about children. I mean, children light up a room.
They light
all
up
the
a room.
time,
Yeah. And then
all
the
time.
doctors are so completely different, the pediatricians versus adult medicine, which is where I'd come from. So across the gamut, I just noticed a pattern, that these were amazing human beings putting everything on the line to help others. but they had no help with how to run businesses, and they weren't the best at it.
No, I'm telling you. So I have two brothers that are doctors, and on top of being a doctor, both of them have 3 master's degrees.
Yeah.
So
common.
No, so
Yeah.
believe me, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm like the least educated in my family. So
Yeah, so I really have such a love for them because, I think people get upset with physicians because maybe they're not making the right decisions about hiring or running a practice, but they don't know. So so I help them navigate through their business, and I love it. I've been doing it now on my own for 7 years, along with my 13th Avenue Media Company.
oh, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. But all of this success
Mhm.
that you have now, y- it was led to this success, right? Your path
Yes, for
and
sure.
what happened. So you tried to commit suicide at a young
Mhm.
age.
I
Commit.
tried-
I said it again.
It's okay.
Attempted.
It took me a long time. Don't
Attempted.
even
But I
worry.
caught myself.
Yes, you did.
So take us back. Take
Mhm.
us back though. And you still talk about your mom and dad.
Oh
So
yeah,
it seems like you have a very loving
very
family.
close.
So
Yeah.
that, because oftentimes when we talk about people who are struggling, and I know it's all over the gamut,
Oh
trust
yeah.
me, I know
Mhm.
this, but oftentimes we say, they must have a troubled family. They
Sure.
must have,
Yeah.
trouble in their life.
Mhm.
But we have never talked about this, you and I, except
Right.
for until today.
Right, which is great.
But you mentioned your parents
Mhm.
and how much
I adore
you
them.
adore them.
They're 1.5 miles away. I
Oh
wouldn't
my
have it any other
gosh.
way. They're married 52 years. They're from Ireland. They
Oh,
immigrated to New York when they were teenagers. They've been together since they were 14. My mom has 12 brothers. She's in New York now because 2 of them are sick. We have an incredibly close family. I went to private school. I was an athlete. We lived in Long Island. As I would say to future therapists and counselors at my rehabs, I come from a residential area. I'm not like these people. And I think that, it's important that people understand that this disease of alcoholism and the disease of addiction and depression can affect anybody. It
So
doesn't matter
what?
where you come from.
That's a very important point.
Mhm.
So what happened, Sharon? What happened?
So, typical teenage girl, I've
How old were you at this point?
So I guess I picked up my first drink probably around 14, but very innocent, I can't even imagine my 16-year-old stepson even having a beer, but
Mhm.
very common back in the day, just to have a few beers, just to feel better about myself. I was a teenager. I had acne. I was chubby. I didn't feel like I fit in. I wasn't as pretty, I thought, as everybody else. And it was a struggle being a young girl, and hormones and all of that fun stuff that we go through in high school. Not. And I think the drinking just made me feel better. And then it led to other substances, which it typically does if you are prone to the disease of alcoholism.
So let me ask you this before
Yes.
we move on. So you take your first drink at
Mhm.
around the age of 14.
Mhm.
At this point, how much are you drinking and are your parents noticing it?
Yeah, so it's very innocent. I would say I covered it up pretty nicely until I
Mhm.
was about 17, 18, because at 18 was the first family intervention. Yeah,
What led to that family intervention?
a lot of drinking.
A lot of drinking. Now, when did your parents suspect and your family suspect that
Well, I was
you were
getting in
dr-
trouble a lot. I mean, I was in private school and I was just a rebel. I was staying out later and always punished, but nothing too terrible,
Mhm,
I mean,
mhm.
just a very normal. I feel like when boys and girls growing up, they experiment. But my experimentation took me down a path that led to drugs as well. So it
And when
wasn't
did it lead you to
probably
drugs?
17, 18. I remember my parents actually giving me money for a car, and that car went up my nose instead of to a vehicle.
Bless your heart. Oh
Yeah,
my
bless my heart,
gosh.
bless my parents'
Oh
hearts,
my
all the
gosh,
money they
bless.
spent on me.
Oh my gosh. So when that money,
Yeah.
so they send you out to buy a car
Yeah, well,
and
they give me money. I mean, my parents were very kind and very
Mhm.
generous. They gave us everything. We never went without. And I wanted to get high more than I wanted anything. I wanted to be out of self. Most people that are using and abusing alcohol and drugs to the extent that I was are trying to get out of some pain. And the worse it gets, it usually goes along with some type of progression, which brings on more pain, which is what happened to me. So, in my first rehab at 18, it was adolescence. So I was having the time of my life. They sent me away to a beautiful rehab facility called Seafield Pines. It was
And-
gorgeous.
And so Seafield, your family intervened, you said
Yes.
at the age of around 17,
18 was when I came home to the intervention.
And then they sent you
They shipped me off to New Hampshire.
to New Hampshire.
Yes.
And
For 30 days.
for 30 days.
Yeah.
And
And I
Did it-
loved it.
you loved it?
I had the time of my life.
Okay, were you drinking? When you
No,
weren't
I
supposed
was
to be
sober,
drinking?
but I was around my people. So I was around other adolescents. They were from 12 to 21 years old that also were drinking a little too much and dabbling in other substances. It was very innocent at 18. When 19 is when I got arrested, and then I was mandated away to a halfway house and a rehab.
Okay, so let's go back.
Okay,
a
good.
bit. So now,
Yes.
so you spend 30 days at this
Beautiful.
beautiful
I
place.
climbed
that-
a mountain.
like a country club.
It was.
Right? Like a country club. So you come back and do you feel re-energized and I'm refocused?
No,
and-
I went right to the bar.
You went right to the
yeah,
bar,
I
so-
just felt like I did not have a problem at 18 years old. Who in the world would think that they had a problem with alcohol? I was like every other teenager that I met in this rehab that just
Mhm.
maybe drinks a little too much. And then, as I mentioned before, the progression of this disease, if you have a tendency to become alcoholic or a drug addict, it will only get worse. And mine certainly got worse.
and you got arrested.
I did.
What happened to lead to your arrest?
This is not a great story, but I'll tell you. I mean, I was drinking at a bar. It was a hotel bar in Long Island, and I was hanging out with a bunch of blacktop construction workers because, like, who isn't at
Right.
18 or 19, however old I was? And it came time for the bar tab, and I had my girlfriend's temporary identification. And back in the day, I just turned 48 the other day. Back in
Happy
the day,
birthday.
thank you. We didn't need a picture on our license, so it said I had blonde hair and was 21 years old, and that was my girlfriend's identification. And I, when it came time for the bar tab, of course I didn't have the money. I was, 19.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just left, and I left my identification there, and they went to arrest my girlfriend,
Oh boy.
whose brother was a cop.
Oh
It
boy.
was a bad scene. And then I was mandated now. So my parents, of course, got me a great attorney, Stuart Sirota. I'll never forget him. And
Wow.
I had to swear on a Bible that I would go to AA meetings for the rest of my life. But before that was going to happen, I had to go to another rehab. And then I was mandated to a halfway house.
Okay, so now this halfway house that you were
Yes.
mandated to,
Mhm.
the halfway house, I would imagine, was nothing like the rehab center.
It wasn't like the country club. It was called Bulger House in Poughkeepsie, New York, because that's what they called it, Poughkeepsie, New York. It was, and I told the counselor there that I was from this residential area and that I wasn't like everybody else because there were heroin addicts there and homeless people. And I remember there was a girl there that had AIDS, and I just felt like I was so foreign to what I was now being exposed to. And everybody would tell me that I'm going to end up just like those people if I don't put down the drink and the drugs. And I was mandated to 3 months, but I started developing this depression that would lead me to these suicide attempts, and called mom and dad, who I should mention, they were going to Family Anonymous to get help to
Mhm.
not enable me, but then had stopped going by this time and came and picked me up.
So within the 3 months,
Yeah.
did you attempt suicide during
Until
this?
when I got home.
When you got
Yeah,
home.
When I got home.
And did they pick you up earlier than the 3 months then?
Yeah,
or
it was
you-
just a month.
It was just a month.
Yeah.
So
So, I
you-
could have gone to jail. That's how bad it is when you're in a haze of addiction and alcoholism. Like I would have rather gone to jail than be in a halfway house with people that I didn't think I was anything like. That's how sick and insidious the disease is.
We are going to take a quick break, and when we
Good.
come back, I know we need a break. I want to come back and talk
Mhm.
about when you went home and
Mhm.
your first attempt
Yeah, great.
at suicide. All right, Sharon, thank you so much, and we'll be right back.
Thanks.
This podcast is brought to you by Zips Dry Cleaners. I'm Sarina Fazan. I don't know about you, but there are not enough hours in the day. Well, thanks to Zips, one less task on my to-do list. For only $3.49 per garment, they actually pick up my dry cleaning and drop it off. I get it the very next day. Just give them a call.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I'm joined with Sharon. Can you say your last name this time?
Fekete. It's not an easy one.
It's not an easy one. And I'm thinking, okay, I know I have it. It's Sharon, you're telling us your incredible story. And it really, I mean, as heart-wrenching and as hard as it is, it could be very inspiring and help somebody.
Well, that's why we're doing this.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we are back now to your parents come and pick you up. And they bring you home.
Yes.
And how, at this point, what are you thinking? And you're, 18, 19
so
years old?
I'm 19 years old, and now I'm back home at mom and dad's, and all my friends are going to college, and life is just going on like normal. And I'm back from my second rehab halfway house, and I'm starting to think about my life, and I'm in my parents' bedroom, and it's not fun. And I sink into a depression. I was attending a community college at the time, and not even knowing what was happening while I was going to school, because I was obsessed with the thought of self, with the thought of how my life has gotten so out of control, and I'm 19 years old, and the depression started to take over. And so I'll just lead you to the night that I attempted suicide. I had two girlfriends that picked me up, and we were going to go driving around. We didn't have cell phones back then.
Right, I know.
We drove around. So we're driving around and smoking pot and whatever else we're doing. And they were asking me, what happened to you? Like what? Because I was very quiet. I became extremely withdrawn. And I couldn't even, if you asked me a question, I could answer yes or no. I couldn't elaborate on how I was feeling or thinking because I was so depressed. And I just thought that like I had fallen into some type of psychosis without being diagnosed. So, and I was taking psychology, which didn't help. So I was reading this book, right? My textbook about all the symptoms that one might have if they had AIDS. This is in my book. And it lists all of these things: brain fog, quiet, not knowing how to talk, all these symptoms. And I'm like, that's me. I have AIDS.
So now you're convinced.
So I'm convinced I have AIDS
that you could die from.
Because maybe I caught it mysteriously from this person at Build Your House, which we know could never have happened. We know today, but that's what people thought back then. And I just, I took Tylenol PMs that night, which is not going to kill you, I found out. But I took a whole bottle and then got very sick on my bedroom floor. And I had to wake my parents up because I was just
so sick.
Yeah, I was so sick. And my mother worked, so both of my parents worked at hospitals. So my mother had to take me to the hospital that she worked at with her daughter, who just attempted suicide. And now I have to drink charcoal because I've attempted suicide at the same hospital my mother works at. So imagine the humiliation, but just unconditional love that she shouldn't even think to take me somewhere else. She wanted me to get the best help.
It shows. I mean, a mother's love is, so they knew, your parents knew clearly that you attempted.
Yes. Oh yeah. Suicide. There was no hiding it, but
So after that, did they say, okay, we need to get her into another place, or what happened?
Well, I had started attending 12-step meetings, right? So they were always, once you go to a rehab, you're introduced to recovery. So they thought maybe if I went to some recovery meetings, and I was going, but eventually I picked up and I started drinking again. Because the thing about, and this happens to a lot of people, and this is what happened to me, I was never really depressed or suicidal when I was drinking. It was when I was left with my own thoughts. I mean, I was drinking to get out of self, and now I have nothing. So I just have my thoughts.
The drinking and the drugs were an escape.
Absolutely. They made me funnier and prettier and sexier. So, yes, now I am drinking again. And when I drink, the depression lifts. Does it really? No.
No, of course not. But
Right.
you feel like
I
it's
feel
gone.
better.
Right.
Yes. So now it's, when it gets really bad. So I blacked out, and it's a blackout, so I don't remember, okay? I blacked out and I woke up in Detroit, Michigan with some guy named Spokane. I know, it's bad.
My gosh. Okay. So do you remember now at
No.
all? I mean, because so how long were you there? How long were you?
2 years.
2 years.
Yes.
Who was this guy? Who was
So,
this?
he was left. I mean, come on. I wasn't going to stay with somebody named Spokane. I was going to move on to somebody better like Sugar Bear. Yeah. So I was in a blackout. I was high. I was drunk. I started smoking crack. And I say this very emphatically in my book because there's too much. If we're going to normalize anything, right? We're going to have normalized conversations about mental health. I mean, I say it. And in my first few years, I said I smoked cocaine because smoking crack sounds really horrible. It sounds like something a derelict would do. But I smoked crack. So I don't want to sugarcoat anything because I want people to start feeling like that shame can be removed when we've overcome. So anyway, I was smoking crack. I was drunk all the time. I was with this guy, Spokane. This is what must have happened. I'm leaving you, Spokane. Great. Bye. And then I met Bear, full name Sugar Bear. Like all of them had aliases. He had just gotten out of Jackson State Penitentiary after doing 11 years. It's all in the book. I mean, it's just exhausting to even talk about anymore because it feels like I'm not talking about myself.
It's like a different person.
Yeah,
but this
of
happened.
course.
But this happened to you.
To me, yes. My mom and dad won't forget. I'll tell you that right now. So so I spent 2 years in a blackout in Detroit, Michigan. My purse would be found in a dumpster, and my parents would get a phone call that we found your daughter's identification, and they would think I was dead. And I mean, it must have been so traumatic for my whole family because I have a big, loving family. So thank goodness they were all lighting up candles at all the churches from New York to Ireland, where my parents are from. And I went home after being beat up for the last time by this man. I was going to say gentleman. That would have been a
Sugar Bear.
Yeah, Sugar Bear. Full name Sugar Bear. His nickname was Bear, okay? Let's get this right.
Bless
I
your
mean, it's
heart.
just
Oh my
ridiculous.
gosh.
So, so now 21 years old, I come back to my parents' bedroom again in the same room where I attempted suicide. So the cycle continues.
So at that age now, though, you come back. What happens?
So I'm traumatized. So we talk about this a lot now today. My parents are very vocal about what it was like because nobody talked about it when I came home. We called it She Went Away instead of saying I went to Detroit, Michigan, because they were walking around on eggshells. They were so afraid I was going to leave. I mean, they thought I was dead so many times. So how could they say anything that would upset me? So we just never talked about it. I fell back into this deep, dark depression, which was much worse than the first time. And I did not, I would practice throwing myself down the basement stairs. They have basements in New York.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, I know, because I was so afraid. I was afraid of a gun and I was too afraid to hang myself and I was afraid of everything. But I wanted to leave the earth because that depression came back. I no longer had alcohol or drugs, and now I had been traumatized being in Detroit, Michigan. I thought it was bad when I was 19 that my friends were going off to college. Now they were getting married, and I'm starting my life over again, and I'm only 21. I have no job. I have no college degree, and I'm in my parents' house again. So it was traumatic, and that depression was horrible. I was going to recovery meetings, I want you to know, so unless you want to ask me something.
No,
Yeah.
when you were talking about how you were practicing throwing yourself down the stairs, so was there a second attempt?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was
suicide
every single day, and a lot of people listening to this that know what depression is like and know what suicidal ideation is like. The thought doesn't leave. You don't think once a week how to leave the earth. You think every day, all day, or
It's
you're
an
going to wake up.
all-consuming thought.
Yeah, it was terrible. And if it wasn't for a few wonderful things, one being my loving parents, a source greater than myself, these recovery meetings, the community that I belonged to, and this EAP counselor that my father had at New York Hospital. So I wrote a chapter dedicated to it. It's called Tuesdays with Ben Figueres, and he was my dad's EAP counselor. And of course, my parents were getting help while I was blacked out in Michigan, and thank God for this man. And my dad and I are very similar, and he said, I think you'll like Ben. I was like, you want me to go all the way into Manhattan to see a therapist? All right, well, it's not like I'm doing anything else. And I did. And I say this a lot now because I want, again, to make sure that we remove the stigma, and the only way to do it is to normalize it and to know what to ask somebody. So this man said to me, are you having suicidal thoughts? And I said yes. And it was the first time anyone had ever asked me that. And it was that freedom of isolation in my mind of now admitting to somebody that I no longer wanted. It wasn't my secret anymore. So now I got help. So then the psychiatrist, and now I'm in therapy. I'm put on 20 milligrams of Prozac for 6 months. They're weaning me off of it, and I haven't taken any medication
For 26 years.
Yes.
So all of this is
Yeah.
in your book.
It is.
What is the name of your book?
The Broken Road to Mental Health in Life and in Business. Because if it wasn't for the business that I was in today, the businesses, and what I was witnessing, I would have kept this in my own life. I wouldn't have shared it in the business community. I work with doctors. Hey, doc, I smoked crack. Like, it doesn't go over well. But I thought it was so important because I've been a witness to what happens inside medical practices, outside, being in pediatrics and being in a very well-to-do community and nobody wanting to talk about the child that has anorexia or wants to die by suicide, being Baker acted, and the doctors not being trained professionally about what to do because they're primary care and they need to, it's a whole thing. So, and I saw a lot of people in the business community here in Tampa Bay that were losing their children to opioid overdose, to suicide. And I felt like a fraud because I knew I could help if I shared it.
And that's why you shared your story.
That is why I share my story.
So where can we get your book?
Amazon. And when I leave here, I'm going to finish up my Audible. It's also on my podcast for free because I'd never want, listen, you write a book, I didn't do it because I thought I was going to become, rich off of writing a book that's going to be sold on Amazon that I'm going to make $3. I did it because I wanted people to know the story, because if I wasn't relatable to somebody else, if I wasn't going, I could be a picture of hope for somebody.
And you are a picture of hope.
There were a ton of
Absolutely.
other pictures of hope for me. So why would I be so selfish and not give that away? So yes, on Amazon and soon to be on Audible.
Well, thank you, Sharon, so much for joining
Thank you.
us on this podcast. You're so inspiring, and
Thank you.
you are offering hope.
Thank you.
You're offering hope, and I'm hoping that someone that's listening or watching and that might be struggling will reach out to someone to get help, and to also know that this can touch anybody at all. Anybody at all.
You're not alone.
No, you're absolutely not alone. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. You can find me on all of my social media platforms, and thank you for all your support. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, of course.